Have you ever felt an inexplicable chill when talking to someone? A strange discomfort? As if something was off, but you couldn't quite name it? They smiled at you. They said all the right things, but deep down your body whispered, "Get away." It wasn't fear in the usual sense. It was primal, ancient, like some part of you sensed danger that your rational mind could not grasp. Carl Jung, one of the deepest thinkers in modern psychology, paid close attention to moments like these. While most people dismiss them as overreactions, Jung believed these gut feelings were signals, subtle but powerful clues from the unconscious. He discovered that the most dangerous people rarely raise their voices. They don't insult you, they don't threaten you, they don't even act hostile. In fact, they often seem charming, helpful, wise, even spiritual. But beneath that smooth surface lies a fracture, one that your intuition picks up long before your intellect can explain it. Jung called these people possessed by the shadow, not in a supernatural sense, but in a psychological one. They are blind to the darkest parts of themselves. And because they cannot see it within, they project it outward, onto you. This is not fiction. This is not paranoia. It is a phenomenon deeply embedded in human relationships and often overlooked. Ancient traditions spoke of it in other terms: the Buddhist darkened mirror, the Christian beam in your own eye, the Zen riddle of the original face. But Jung gave it a language for our modern age, a framework to understand why some people, despite appearing kind, intelligent, or evolved, leave us feeling drained, confused, or subtly violated. This video is a psychological journey. We will walk through the 6 most dangerous signs a person can show, according to Jung. Not to judge others, but to protect ourselves and see more clearly into our own shadow. Because what we don't recognize controls us. Imagine you're having a calm conversation, nothing intense, nothing hostile, and then, suddenly, they say something that hits you like a slap. They accuse you of having bad intentions. They say you're manipulative, selfish, or dishonest. But you've never acted that way. Not toward them, not even close. Still, they say it with absolute certainty. At first, you question yourself. Did I do something wrong? Then confusion, frustration, even guilt. What you're experiencing is not about you. You are being cast into a role in someone else's unconscious story. Carl Jung called this shadow projection, the tendency to take the parts of ourselves we reject and throw them onto someone else. The shadow in Jungian psychology is made up of everything we refuse to accept about ourselves: our anger, our envy, our cruelty, our fear. These parts don't disappear. We bury them, and they wait, festering in the unconscious. But eventually they find a way out. And when they do, we don't see them in ourselves. We see them in others. So when someone accuses you out of nowhere, when their reaction feels too big, too personal, too convinced, they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the shadow self they can't face within. This is one of the most dangerous patterns Jung discovered in human psychology, because it doesn't feel like a lie, it feels like truth. The person projecting isn't pretending. They really believe you're the problem. And because of that belief, their accusations can be dangerously persuasive to others. They speak with conviction. They present themselves as victims of your supposed behavior, even when nothing they say actually matches your reality. Modern neuroscience supports this. Our brains are wired to confirm what we already believe. This is called confirmation bias. But in the case of massive shadow projection, the bias becomes a full-blown distortion, a kind of psychological hallucination. Psychologist Robert Johnson compared it to putting on tinted glasses. Once you wear them, everything you see is colored by them. You no longer see me. You see a version of me, filtered through your wounds. Spiritual traditions warned about this long before science gave it a name. In Buddhism, it's the darkened mirror. You see your own impurities reflected back, but believe they belong to the other. In Christianity, Jesus said, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log in your own?" The most dangerous part? The projector truly believes they are seeing clearly, And in that certainty, they become immune to correction. This is the first major red flag Jung identified. When someone accuses you of emotions, thoughts, or motives that don't align with your experience, and they're not open to dialogue or evidence, you are not in a conversation. You are in a projection, and worse, you may become the villain in a story that has nothing to do with you. When you sense this, Jung's advice is clear. Withdraw immediately. You cannot reason with a projection. You can only protect your own boundaries. This doesn't mean they're evil. It means they are trapped, blind to their own inner darkness. And as long as they stay blind, they will assign that darkness to you. Understanding shadow projection doesn't just help us avoid dangerous people. It helps us recognize when we are the ones projecting. Because here's the truth. We all have a shadow. The question is, do we see it? Or are we forcing someone else to carry it for us? There's a saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Carl Jung would add, and driven by those who believe they are unquestionably good. Of all the signs Jung identified as dangerous, this one is perhaps the most deceiving because it wears the mask of virtue. He called it psychic inflation, a state in which the ego identifies with archetypal forces, the savior, the prophet, the enlightened one, the voice of ultimate truth. These people don't just think they're right, they believe they are righteous, not merely correct in an argument, but divinely correct, morally superior, spiritually unshakable, and that's what makes them so dangerous. Unlike arrogance, which is often easy to spot, psychic inflation hides beneath humility. It speaks softly, it claims to help, it appears evolved, but beneath that exterior is a rigid ego that refuses to be questioned. Because in their mind, they are not speaking as a fallible human. They are channeling something higher. Zen traditions have a name for this: Zen sickness. It's the illness that comes after awakening, when the ego secretly claims ownership of the light. In Sufi mysticism, it's called the veil of light, more dangerous than the veil of darkness because it is much harder to recognize. Jung saw this pattern again and again in spiritual leaders, gurus, and charismatic figures. He warned, when a person loses the ability to doubt their own motives, you are no longer dealing with a human being. You are dealing with an archetype. And archetypes are not gentle. You can spot this phenomenon by how someone reacts to criticism. A healthy person, even a wise one, might feel discomfort or defensiveness, but they eventually reflect. They grow. The psychically inflated person, they interpret your disagreement as blasphemy. You're not just wrong. You are resisting truth, light, or goodness itself. They don't argue, they preach. And if you push back, you're not simply offering another viewpoint. You're attacking the divine order they believe they represent. This is not just dangerous to others. It's also destructive to the person experiencing it. Because the human psyche cannot carry the weight of the divine. And when the ego inflates beyond its natural size, it will eventually collapse. Jung observed that the more someone is inflated by archetypal energy, the more catastrophic the fall when reality reasserts itself. What begins as certainty can end in burnout, breakdown, or spiritual devastation. But until that collapse, inflated individuals often attract followers. Their conviction is magnetic. They speak in absolutes. And in a world drowning in uncertainty, that's exactly what people crave. They seem like leaders, truth-tellers, saviors. But what you're really seeing is someone possessed by a force far greater than they can handle. Psychologist Claudio Naranjo put it clearly: the ordinary ego says I am important. The spiritual ego says, I am the voice of what is good. One is annoying, the other is terrifying, because when someone believes they are the sole vessel of truth, they can justify anything, silencing others, dismissing pain, even committing harm, all in the name of the greater good. Jung's warning is timeless. Beware those who claim purity, not because they're bad, but because they've lost the ability to reflect. Real wisdom always includes humility. Real light casts a shadow, and those who have truly met their darkness do not speak as if they are above it. Have you ever met someone who seemed too perfect? They always know what to say. They always smile at the right moment. They never offend, never express doubt, never reveal vulnerability. On the surface, they are flawless, but something deep inside you whispers, something isn't real. Carl Jung called this phenomenon total identification with the persona, and he considered it one of the greatest psychological dangers. The persona is the social mask we wear. It's how we present ourselves to the world. Polished, appropriate, acceptable. And that's normal. We all need a persona to function in society. But when the mask becomes the whole identity, when there is nothing behind it, you're no longer interacting with a person. You're interacting with a performance. The problem isn't the mask. The problem is forgetting that it is a mask. Jung believed that when someone is overly adapted to social expectations, they sacrifice their inner truth. They become a character, an actor playing the role of the good one, the polite one, the strong one, at the expense of their authenticity. And here's what's truly dangerous. The more perfect the persona, the more repressed the shadow behind it. You might feel it as an unease you can't explain. Their words are kind, their smile is warm, but their presence feels hollow. This is not your imagination. Neuroscience now tells us that our brains are equipped with mirror neurons, cells that pick up subtle incongruities between what someone says and what they actually feel. When there's a mismatch, when the body and the words don't align, we feel it, even if we don't know why. Jung warned, the greater the persona, the darker the shadow. Because all that gets denied, anger, doubt, fear, desire, doesn't disappear. It builds. And when the mask eventually cracks, what erupts is often chaotic, raw, and destructive. Jung's colleague Marie-Louise von Franz observed this in clients who lived overly perfect lives. They often experienced episodes of uncontrollable rage, depression, or breakdown. Not because they were weak, but because the self they had been suppressing could no longer stay buried. It's not hard to see this in real life. Sometimes the most controlled, admired individuals, the ones who seem ideal, are the very ones who shock us with sudden, irrational behavior. Outbursts, affairs, cruelty, addictions. The truth is, no one can live behind a mask forever. Jung compared this to Greek tragedy. The persona is the actor's mask in ancient theater, a necessary tool for the stage. But if the actor forgets who they are beneath it, the play becomes a prison. Eastern traditions warned about this too. Zen Buddhism speaks of the original face before you were born, a metaphor for your unconditioned, authentic self. Taoist masters cautioned against polishing the surface so much that the essence wears away. So how do you recognize someone lost in their persona? They are always on. There's no spontaneity, no contradiction. They never admit confusion or mistake. They conform perfectly, but at the cost of depth, warmth, and vulnerability. And over time, that perfection becomes unnerving, because what's missing is humanity. Jungian analyst James Hollis said it best. Excessive social perfection often conceals a proportional emptiness inside. When you feel a subtle distrust around someone who seems ideal, listen to it. That's not judgment. That's your psyche recognizing the absence of soul, because true connection requires imperfection, and a real human being is not seamless. They are whole. You're talking to someone you've known for years, same face, same voice. But suddenly something shifts. Their gaze becomes intense. Their voice, more commanding, less human. The room feels colder. You don't know what's happening, but you feel it in your bones. The person in front of you is no longer just themselves. Carl Jung called this phenomenon archetypal possession, a terrifying moment when an individual is overtaken by a force much larger than their own personality. Archetypes, in Jungian psychology, are primordial patterns that live in the collective unconscious. They are not fantasies or symbols. They are structuring forces, universal themes that shape how we think, feel, and act. The mother, the warrior, the savior, the victim, the judge. These energies can inspire us, guide us, and help us grow. But when we identify with them completely, we lose our psychological balance. Jung warned, when an archetype seizes the psyche, the individual disappears. You are no longer interacting with a full human being. You are speaking to a fragment, a role, a myth, an idea that has swallowed the soul beneath it. These people don't just feel strongly, they feel absolutely right. There is no hesitation, no ambiguity, no reflection, only mission. In ancient times, we called this possession, not by demons, but by forces, energies, unconscious patterns that override the personal self. Shamanic cultures understood this well. As anthropologist Mirsha Eliade documented, shamans learned to channel archetypal energy in controlled rituals. But they also feared what happens when that energy takes over uncontrollably. In Christian mysticism, this was called the discernment of spirits, the ability to tell the difference between divine inspiration and dangerous inflation. You can recognize archetypal possession by certain signs. The person becomes rigid. They speak in absolutes. They embody one role, savior, victim, judge, with no space for contradiction. Their eyes often hold a strange intensity. Their words have a monolithic tone, as if they're reciting, not speaking. And most unsettling of all, you may feel like they're not fully there, present physically but not spiritually, as if a force is speaking through them. Neurological studies have begun to explore these states. In some altered states of consciousness, brain activity linked to personal identity decreases, while areas connected to transcendent experience become hyperactive. In ritual or spiritual practice, this can be beautiful. But in daily life, it can be catastrophic, because the person in this state feels invincible. They radiate purpose, conviction, certainty, and others feel it too. Jung saw how psychically possessed leaders could move entire nations, not through reason, but through their sheer mythic intensity. But here's the danger. Every archetype contains polarities. The savior also holds the seat of the tyrant. The warrior carries both courage and cruelty. The victim hides both pain and manipulation. When someone identifies completely with one archetype, they will eventually act out its darkest side, often without any awareness of the contradiction. Jung documented many cases where people in these states committed acts entirely opposed to their stated values, then justified them with chilling clarity. Because when you're possessed by an archetype, you don't see yourself. You become the role, and you lose the capacity for self-reflection, which is, in the end, what makes us human. Some patterns in life seem too familiar to be coincidence. You meet someone new, and somehow the same heartbreak plays out. Different face, same pain. You find yourself in the same argument, the same betrayal, the same emotional trap, again and again. And each time you ask, why does this keep happening to me? Carl Jung had an answer. He called it the compulsion to repeat, an unconscious drive to recreate early emotional wounds over and over, as if trapped in an invisible maze with no exit. But why would anyone choose pain? Because the unconscious isn't seeking happiness. It's seeking completion, understanding, healing. And until the original wound is made conscious, it repeats. Not because you're cursed, but because your psyche is trying to resolve what it never fully processed. The psychoanalyst Christopher Bollas called these hidden patterns unthought knowns, experiences so early or so painful, they were never truly felt, never fully processed. Yet they shape your reality from beneath the surface. Spiritual traditions understood this long before psychology did. In early Buddhism, karma didn't mean cosmic justice. It referred to conditioned patterns, habits of perception and action that repeat until seen clearly. In Christianity, the idea of original sin can be understood psychologically as the burden of inherited patterns we never chose, but still live through, unconsciously. So how can you recognize the compulsion to repeat? The clearest sign is emotional déjà vu, a recurring script in your life story. You're always the betrayed one, the abandoned one, the misunderstood one, and no matter how much changes on the surface. New partner, new job, new city. The outcome is eerily familiar. Even more disturbing, You feel surprised every time, as if fate is against you, as if life is playing a cruel trick. But in truth, something inside you is recreating the conditions for the same story. Not because you want to suffer, but because part of you still doesn't know what else to be. Neuroscience backs this up. Early emotional experiences, especially traumatic ones, literally shape the structure of the brain. They create neural pathways, tracks of expectation, habits of perception. Your brain begins to anticipate betrayal, so it looks for clues. It reacts before confirming. It sees enemies where there are none, because that's what it learned long ago. And here's the deepest danger. People trapped in unconscious repetition often recruit others into their internal dramas. Without realizing it, they cast you in a role: the abandoner, the savior, the persecutor. As analyst Donald Kalschit observed, unprocessed trauma demands to be staged. You might find yourself caught in someone's psychological theater, playing a part you never auditioned for. Jung called this negative synchronicity, when the unconscious arranges life events that mimic inner wounds, creating a sense of doomed repetition. It feels like destiny, but it's actually memory. Memory masquerading as fate. Jungian therapists notice it when a person tells the same story again and again, with only the names and places changed. And beneath that repetition is a core truth. What remains unconscious controls us. Until we bring it to light, we will act it out, or have it acted upon us. So what can we do? First, recognize the pattern, not with blame or shame, but with compassion. Then ask the hardest question: what part of me keeps choosing this script? Not because I'm weak, but because I haven't yet learned a new role. The compulsion to repeat is not a life sentence. It's a call to consciousness. And once we answer that call, the story can finally change. If everything we've explored so far sounds haunting, it's because it is. But Carl Jung didn't stop at diagnosis. He also pointed to the cure, a path, not quick, not easy, but real. It's called integration. Specifically, the integration of the shadow. What separates a psychologically dangerous person from a psychologically mature one isn't perfection. It's self-awareness, not the absence of darkness, but the willingness to face it, to own it, to work with it. Because here's the truth. We all carry within us the capacity for cruelty, fear, envy, manipulation. The question is not, do I have a shadow? The question is, am I honest about it? Jung said it plainly: I would rather be whole than good. Wholeness means we no longer pretend. We no longer wear masks of artificial purity. We no longer outsource our darkness onto others and call it morality. Instead, we sit with it. We learn from it. We transform it. Tibetan Buddhism speaks of this process as turning poison into medicine, using even our most difficult emotions as fuel for insight. Western alchemy symbolized it as turning lead into gold, the lead of the rejected self into the gold of integrated consciousness. This journey is not glamorous. It won't earn applause, but those who walk it begin to radiate something unmistakable, a grounded, humble authority. They don't speak in absolutes. They're not obsessed with appearing good. They don't need to convince you of anything, because they've stopped performing. They've started listening. First to themselves. You can recognize them by their honesty. They admit their flaws without self-pity. They speak with compassion, not superiority. They don't divide the world into saints and sinners. They see the shared complexity in all of us. Neuroscience supports this. Researchers like Daniel Siegel have shown that integration creates new neural pathways, linking emotional centers with the prefrontal cortex, allowing for better self-regulation and reflection. And here's the paradox. The more honestly you face your darkness, the less it controls you. As Jungian analyst Robert Johnson wrote, "What we deny doesn't disappear. It just returns in forms we can't control. But what we acknowledge, what we consciously carry, loses its power to sabotage us and becomes fuel for something deeper: wisdom, creativity, connection." That's the real mark of transformation, not perfection, but integration. So pause for a moment and reflect. Have you seen parts of these patterns in others? More importantly, have you seen them in yourself? If something in this video stirred you, if a specific section felt personal, don't run from it. Sit with it. Because discomfort is not the enemy, it's the doorway. And if you've made it this far, you're already walking the path Jung pointed to. The path back to yourself. Before we close, I invite you to share your reflections in the comments. What part of this message spoke to you most deeply? Have you recognized these signals in people you once trusted, or in your own behavior? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear, so don't hesitate, speak honestly, and listen generously. If you found value in this exploration, consider subscribing for more deep dives into Jungian psychology and the inner world. And if there's someone in your life who might need this message, share it with them, because the journey toward wholeness is not one we take alone.